Okay, so I am recording this call now. Okay.
Well, Ohio is a one-party consent state anyway, so
Okay.
I could never have a complaint of you recording the call, because if you consent to it, then you're fine. But I consent to it too, so it doesn't matter.
All right, sounds good to me. Okay, so I talked on the second episode about how it might be a good idea for a prosecutor to recuse themselves if there is a conflict of interest. And I am here right now with Sean Swain. As I said, I would ask him, and he has agreed to talk to us a little bit about it. And I'm extremely excited that he's here. Sean, did you want to say hi?
Hi, yeah, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on.
Oh, no, it's awesome. Thank you.
So I'm going to play this part for you, and then it's just going to be really interesting, I think, to have your opinion on this. So let's go.
Okay.
Recuse oneself isn't supposed to be based on feelings, because everyone tries to be unbiased. So we all try to see ourselves as unbiased. So typically, recusal will happen if it appears to be a conflict of interest. Even if the person recusing doesn't feel conflicted per se, if on the outside it looks like there's a conflict, usually it's a good idea to recuse oneself. I mean, and sometimes people don't, and that just always leaves that question lingering, like we have here. You know, why wouldn't Kevin Baxter be willing to recuse himself, given that he was friends with Andrew Crouch's family? Isn't that more of like a personal vendetta? Can't that be seen as that? Is it beneficial to the prosecuting attorney to get this conviction as a Democrat and part of the Democratic Party, and having an official of the Democratic Party or somebody who's working with the Democratic Party, you know, I mean, you see it. I don't even have to say it. You see it. It goes on at the major levels of our government right now. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to say it, but you know what I'm talking about.
1 minute.
So I think this is a really important discussion, and we could probably talk about it for hours. And maybe I'll ask Sean to speak about this and upload a video in the near future so that you can hear his thoughts. I think expounding on this topic is probably... Okay, so I know we have just like a second, and then you'll have to call back.
Well, why don't I just call back? I can just do that.
Okay, yeah, call back.
What do you think?
Yeah, sounds great. All right.
I'll see you in just a minute.
All right.
Thank you for using...
So we're waiting for Sean Swain to call us back right now to hear his thoughts on Kevin Baxter not recusing himself, and then just generally speaking, how some prosecutors have a conflict of interest, but they're not required to recuse themselves, and how does that create problems like in the American justice system? You know, just overall. I just think it's not something you think about a lot. Oh, here's Sean. So this is great.
Hello. This is a prepaid debit call from
Sean Swain.
an inmate at the Ohio State Penitentiary. To accept this call, press 0. To refuse this call. This call is from a DRC correctional facility and is subject to monitoring and recording. Utilization of an unapproved application and three-way calls to communicate are strictly prohibited and a violation of DRC policy. Thank you for using GTL. Thank you for using GTL.
Hi.
Hi. So you're still recorded, just so you know.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay. So I was going to read this to you, and I'll put it on the board. It's from the American Bar Association, and I'll put everything on the screen so people can see where I'm getting this.
So it states that the prosecutor should not permit the prosecutor's professional judgment or obligations be affected by the prosecutor's personal, political, financial, professional, business, property, or other interests or relationships. A prosecutor should not allow interest in personal advancement or aggrandizement to affect judgments regarding what is in the best interest of justice in any case. So when I look at your case specifically, and I'm sure there's a plethora of cases where it's just questionable about the prosecutor at all. And Kevin Baxter, as I was saying in the episode, was probably friends. Their coworkers are probably friends. And then they're also Democrats. They're both, affiliated with the same party. And this is, small town. So they definitely knew each other. They definitely were friendly with one another. They cared about each other on some level, whether it be for their own personal benefit as, politicians or, just being friends as, people that work together sometimes become. So what do you think about that with your, personal, did you feel like that was something that was going on? There was a personal thing against you? And then could you talk about maybe, about how it affects, all over the country, how that could be going on, and all these, small courthouses?
Right. So,
or do you think
maybe I should go with that second question first and talk about the larger context, I think.
Okay.
What do you think?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I have some thoughts about that. So, prosecutors, by the way, not everywhere, but in Erie County, the prosecutor gets elected to public office, which means he has to have voters like him in order to get elected. So, when you talk about this American Bar Association rule that says prosecutors should never consider any kind of political considerations or anything like that, it seems at best a very naive proposition that an elected official is not going to consider the political ramifications of their decisions.
I agree. I mean, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, because that's their livelihood. That's how they put food on the table. So, there's just some context here, but I would suggest that every single decision that a prosecutor makes, whether they're aware of it or not, is a political decision. You can look at things like the OJ case. And I'm not suggesting OJ should have been charged with capital murder. I don't particularly believe in the death penalty at all myself. But when you look at cases that are charged with capital murder, OJ was not. You remember the OJ case, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, you have two dead people, you've got a pool of blood all over the sidewalk, and, the details of this that the media reported, this was grisly. But if you read the books that were later written by the prosecutors that were involved in the case, they described their decision-making processes as to why they didn't charge him with the death penalty. And these are all political considerations that really have nothing to do with the facts of the case. When you look at a case like the George Floyd killing and how the cops were prosecuted, I would like to think that they were prosecuted because the prosecutors were moral and timorous people who believed that a terrible injustice had happened to George Floyd. But I truly believe that they prosecuted those cops because they didn't want any more police precincts getting burnt down. There were Really? You're right.
No.
I mean, there were political considerations. There was a spotlight on them, and they wanted to do the thing that they felt they had to do in order to appease all of these other social and political considerations.
Right. The pressures of it. I mean, if they decided not to prosecute the cops, which happens all the time all over the country, it's just determined that they were acting within their rights as cops, they would have received such backlash if they decided not to do that. They would not have been reelected, and they know that.
Yeah.
So it's obvious.
And you can't think that didn't occur to these prosecutors. So this whole idea, it's kind of a unicorn requirement, right? That the American Bar Association requires prosecutors to ride into the courtroom on a unicorn.
Right.
Because you have about as much chance of that happening as you do a prosecutor not considering the political and social ramifications and the ramifications to their own careers. It's just not possible for them to do that. And I'm not saying that to defend Kevin Baxter. I'm simply saying here that when you look at what Kevin Baxter decided to do, perhaps some of this is in large part because prosecutors are just accustomed to swimming in political decisions.
Yeah.
That's what they're accustomed to doing. It's their job.
Right.
You can't expect them to not do that. So then, when we get to my case particularly, I had a sense from the very beginning of this case, right, that it was being treated differently. This was an anomaly. This was not a normal case. And even the first public defender that was assigned to me specifically told me, he said, that this case is big, it's huge, everybody's paying attention to it, and you don't have to worry about it because I'm a registered Republican. And I didn't know what he was saying to me at the time. I was oblivious. I was an idiot. But what he was saying was, don't worry about me because Colette Crouch doesn't have a grip on me, is what he was trying to reassure me. And I didn't even know what he was saying to me. It didn't make sense.
Right.
That was one of the first things he said to me. And I didn't understand, well, what would political affiliation have to do with any of this? And it wasn't until later that all of this kind of came together like puzzle pieces, and I was like, oh, now I get it. Also something to consider is that there had only been one other murder case in that county in like the last 3 to 5 years or something. This isn't something that happens every day, that somebody gets charged with murder, right?
Right.
That there's a death, that there's a homicide, that the person gets charged with a murder. So it's a big deal when that happens. And Kevin Baxter has to get reelected. He has to have the case prosecuted, whatever the charges are going to end up being. But when you have something that's high profile making the front page of the paper, typically the prosecutor who is the head prosecutor getting elected wants to take that case. Why? So he can get public exposure, so that people can associate him with fighting crime, so he can get reelected. Properly, by the ABA's rules, he probably should have handed the case off to some other prosecutor in the office, or maybe even called in a special prosecutor from somewhere else. If he were unbiased, he probably would have done that. If he wasn't looking for the personal and political and professional benefits from the case, he would have had to have done that.
Yeah, I agree.
Crouch was not a stranger to him.
I agree. I don't even think it should have been in the court. I feel like it should have been moved out of the court because everybody, it is a small community. You guys are in Sandusky. The population, I think, at the time was 20,000. It's just, these people know each other so well. I mean, I live in a small town, and I'm sure that plenty of people that are listening know what small town politics is like. Everybody knows everybody. The judge knew Colette Crouch, I'm sure, and probably felt sympathy towards the family, which you're not supposed to have. If you're feeling that way, how can you say that you're ruling in an unbiased manner when you can't possibly know that you're not? You want to believe it, that you're being unbiased, but are you? I don't know. It should have been moved out of the whole court, I think, to where nobody had any attachments.
Yeah. The only problem with that solution that you're proposing, the only problem with that is that Colette Crouch wouldn't have been able to control what's happening.
Well, yeah.
And Colette Crouch wanted to control what was happening,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when it all comes down to it, they wanted to say so over how things would happen. All these anomalies that happened in my case, in the first trial, we haven't gotten to the trials yet. People haven't heard about this yet. So I'm not going to, spoiler, I'm not going to do that. But,
no, go ahead. I mean,
my case, yeah.
If you want to, go ahead, because it's at least the first trial will come out. I mean, and I don't know, little teaser never hurt anyone.
So in the first trial, when the prosecutor calls a coroner from 2 counties over, rather than going to the medical examiner in that county, and when the judge excludes my expert witnesses after allowing my attorney to pay them and put them on the witness list, when the photos of the door and the door frame vanish as if they had never existed, all of these things, all of these weird anomalies, when you connect them all together, these are things that these people wouldn't have gotten away with if this had been moved to some distant spot and an actually unbiased judge was there and a special prosecutor who had no interest in the case. In fact, my attorney for the first trial, Terry Roots, in a conversation with him, he told me, he said, look, if not for the political implications in this case, you probably never even would have been charged with a crime,
Oh, yeah.
So the case wouldn't have even been moved. It just would have been dismissed,
Right, especially with the history of Andrew Crouch. How many domestic calls did they take? And he was tased on one occasion for resisting arrest during a domestic dispute. I mean, I think the police knew what they were dealing with him.
Sure, yeah.
You have 1 minute remaining.
She always does that right at the good part. I probably wouldn't have been charged if not for all of the political considerations that were happening. You have to question, is the prosecutor working for the state objectively in order to prosecute somebody he really thinks is a criminal, or is he getting some benefit and political considerations from powerful people who kind of control the purse strings for his next run for office? Because this impacts not just him, but also the judge and the public defender at the time.
Thank you for using GTL.
And that is like one of the most annoying things that every prisoner has to deal with. You can't just have a freaking conversation. Why would you want people to not have human contact? I don't understand that. They're letting them talk. Why does it have to be interrupted? I don't understand that. If you got your phone call, you get your phone call. Why do you have to have 15 minutes and hang up? Sometimes, there is no callback after that. And I imagine for people who love people in prison or jail, how hard that is. And here we go.
Hello. This is a prepaid debit call from
Sean Swain.
Relay call to communicate strictly prohibited and a violation of DRC policy. Thank you for using GTL. Thank you for using GTL.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome back.
Thank you. So I was talking about Kevin Baxter.
Yeah.
So he's been the prosecutor in Erie County for decades.
Yep, he's still there.
Unopposed.
Yeah.
Ever.
Mm-hmm.
And my first conviction, my initial conviction, came very early on in his career. It got reversed. I came back for a retrial. Now, something to consider, right before I went back up for retrial, there was the case of Richard Storch. Richard Storch had also been reversed by the Court of Appeals. From a political perspective, we have the Erie County prosecutor and the only sitting judge, Ann Mashari, who had cases bounced back to their court. And you have voters who recognize and see this and ask, why is double the taxpayer money being spent to keep prosecuting people? Why does the prosecutor and judge not know what they're doing? And so Storch went back for retrial before I did, and he was acquitted. And so I think that also put pressure on the prosecutor and the judge, because they knew, and this was even expressed to me by people involved in the case, they said that if I were acquitted as well, that would not bode well for the careers of Ann Mashari and Kevin Baxter. So this was pivotal early on in Kevin Baxter's career. This was a crossroads that he faced. What's going to happen for the rest of his career? He needed me to be convicted. If I was not convicted, I suspect in the very next election, he would not have been the prosecutor for a couple of reasons. First, because the voters would not have had confidence that he had botched this case so bad. And second, because Colette Crouch, who was an official for the Democratic Party, would not have gotten her pound of flesh that she had wanted from this case, and she would have bounced him. Further to that, consider what happened to Ann Mashari. Mashari played her role in getting me reconvicted, but she also offended the Crouch family's sensibilities. After I had been the most costly case in Erie County history ever, Judge Mashari sentenced me to the mandatory minimum that she could give me, 20 to life. Not 25, not 30, not life without parole. She gave me the mandatory minimum. And in response to that, what happened? Well, and what I believe, you'll have to look this up, fact check me on this, because I'm not sure. I believe in the very next election cycle, the Democratic Party abandoned her and nominated and endorsed her rival, Ty M. Teague, who then took her spot. He beat her in election. Think about how often this happens, that a Democratic incumbent is opposed by the Democratic Party itself. Considerations are given to the non-incumbent opponent in order to drive that person out of office. That never happens. Quite frankly, the Democrats don't have enough success that they can afford to oppose an incumbent anywhere. But that's what happened to her. And I have no doubt in my mind that this happened because she had offended Colette Crouch. She had not done what she was supposed to do, and so they drove her out of her job over this case. And what happened to Kevin Baxter? Well, he is now more than 30 years later still unopposed. So you see the trajectory of those two political people.
Right.
There's a third person involved also, and that's Eric O'Brien. Eric O'Brien was the public defender whose office I was assigned to. My case was assigned to his office. And quite frankly, from April until October, sometime in October, in 1991, when I was assigned to Eric O'Brien's office, they did absolutely nothing in my defense. And I even it took me 3 weeks to fire them because I couldn't even get them on the phone. This was, they were playing their role as well. They were doing absolutely nothing to defend me. Eric O'Brien was a Democrat. You see a pattern here. Well,
Right.
my case was later assigned to somebody else. They forced Terry Rhodes to go to trial without any preparation at all, and they know what the end result was. Well, after that first trial, Eric O'Brien was endorsed by the Democratic Party to become a municipal judge, and he won. Do you know who his campaign manager was?
I'm interested to know.
Colette Crouch.
Oh, that's so crazy.
So the guy who botched my case, whose office botched my case for the crucial first few months of my case, was rewarded by Colette Crouch. And when I say all this, right, I get it. You know, I'm connecting some dots here. I don't have absolute proof that Colette Crouch said, I'm going to reward you for screwing Swain. I don't know that that's what happened. But turning back to your ABA regarding prosecutors and the spirit of that, right? And the spirit of that is that you want to avoid the appearances of impropriety.
Right.
In all of these cases, when you connect the dots to the behaviors of the public defender's office and the prosecutor and the judge, and you see the outcomes that resulted and who played instrumental roles in those outcomes, can you tell me that there's not an appearance of impropriety here?
Oh, I know.
Yeah. So whether there is impropriety or not, that's up to people to judge and decide for themselves. I have my own conviction. That means two things. I have my own conviction as to what happened there, and I firmly believe, you know, especially given all of the other context to what these people did, and particularly Kevin Baxter. You know, when you look at the website that's dedicated to exposing his corruption, you know, this is an anomaly.
Right, and I will link that website so everybody can see. I got some information from the website. I have spoken with the person who runs the website, really nice person. So yeah, I'm going to link that so everybody can see it on the episode. But I did want to circle back to how you were talking about the prosecutor in the second trial needing that conviction. Now, this was something that I thought about the second trial, and I thought it was just not weird, but it is weird, that one, the pictures are found now of the door jam that was not available, and Kevin Baxter doesn't stop and think, well, maybe this didn't happen. The medical examiner changes the story of, how the stab wounds were inflicted. It wasn't from the back. But Kevin Baxter doesn't slow down and think, well, maybe I shouldn't go after this conviction. And I thought it was supposed to be that a prosecutor, this is also in the American Bar Association website, I'll show that too, they're not supposed to just be going for the win. This isn't a football game. We are seeking justice. You're not supposed to, I just got to get the conviction. I just got to get the win and just throw out, So it's even though things came back in the case for the second trial around where Kevin Baxter could have been maybe this doesn't rise to the level of aggravated murder. He doesn't stop at all. He's out to get you no matter what. Nothing makes him think twice. And that's starting less than 24 hours after the incident initially happened. It's he had a one-track mind, and that was to get you convicted of murder.
Yeah, sure. This is a baby that dropped in his lap. Right from the very beginning, this was an opportunity for him to get a big embrace from the officials of the Democratic Party for Erie County, right?
Oh, yeah.
He knows what they want, and he's the guy who can deliver the package for them. So what could be better for a political career, And maybe this sounds cynical, but I have to think that once he found out that Andrew Crouch was dead, he might have been high-fiving in his office. This is a benefit to his career. And I know that sounds bad to attribute that to someone, but not to him, because particularly to him. And just to speak to his competitive, his desire to win and his upward mobility, when the second trial was over, there was he had a clerk with him, and the clerk's last name was Bowers. And Bowers was a law student. They were both sitting at the table. And the prosecutor's table was directly in front of us, and it was facing the jury. Kevin Baxter turned to the side, turned to Bowers, and said this loud enough for me to be able to hear him. He said, he said, it takes a good prosecutor, guilty man. It takes a great prosecutor to convict an innocent one. I got this guy twice. What's that make me? And so that let me know who Kevin Baxter is. You know, he was ecstatic. He was gloating. You know, this was a career-making case for him. And I think if people go to that website that's dedicated to his corruption, they're going to see that what I'm saying to you right now. I don't expect anybody to just accept what I say. You know, I'm locked up right now, and believe it or not, there are people who are locked up, and some of them lie. So I don't expect anybody to just believe what I'm saying. But when you see all of the other things that paint the fuller picture of who Kevin Baxter is, it's my hope that people recognize that this is all very consistent. You know, that is who he is. When someone reveals to you who they are, don't argue with them.
Right. Yeah. Just as like a regular citizen of our country, it's just so upsetting to know that this stuff happens. I just see the flaws everywhere, just even prosecutors being elected, and how regular people suffer and how that affects our entire society, the way the justice system is being run. Like, it's making everybody sicker. I really have a great dislike for Kevin Baxter, too. And I didn't come into learning about your case feeling that way about him or anything. But, yeah, I just saw him as somebody that was out to win. And I just think that's disgusting. And that you're supposed to have some sort of integrity as prosecutors. It's not, but, I remember when we first started talking and you had said to me that all prisoners are political prisoners. And I'm starting to understand now what you meant by that. I think you know what I mean when I say, I'm going to do political prisoners, but I understand now what you were saying when you said that.
Right. So that's why I stopped using the term to describe me, because when you use the term political prisoner to describe yourself, you're essentially implicating that there are prisoners who are not political. And every single prosecutor is a political agent. Every single decision that prosecutor makes is a political decision. It's based upon those prosecutors' senses of what the end results are going to be, not just for society, but for themselves, for their offices, for their funding, for their longevity, for their upward mobility. And so these are always political considerations. So you can't show me a prisoner who didn't come to prison as a consequence of a political process. You can't show me a single prisoner who didn't, no matter what it is they did or did not do.
Sometimes there's people who don't even go to prison because the prosecutor decided that it would be not beneficial for them to charge that person.
Sure, yeah.
So so there's people that are walking around never getting charged just because, it's just an unfair process. Why does this person get to decide?
So what you're saying, I was charged, and Andrew Crouch is dead, and I have to take responsibility for the role that I played in that, right? But I only did what I did. I didn't do what I didn't do. And I didn't plan his death. I didn't intend for him to die. I intended to survive. So even, and I wish he hadn't died. And I do feel remorse for him not being here, that I played no role in that. I'm only saying that legally, I only did what I did. And you look at other cases. For instance, there was a case in Cleveland where police shot two unarmed motorists like 123 times. Multiple officers had to reload. One officer was standing on the hood of the car, firing into the car. And none of those police officers were charged with crimes. It's hard to compare an apple to an orange, but here, objectively, there isn't just one standard of justice, because prosecutors are not objective people. There's no such thing as objectivity. We are all subjective because, we all have an interest in an outcome. So objectivity is a lie. It's a myth. It doesn't really exist. Every prosecutor would tell you that they're objective, and they make these wide-ranging decisions that are totally inconsistent with one another. That's the system of justice. Now, one good thing is that traditionally, it seems to me that people have bought into the idea that the justice system always works. And now, for multiple reasons, people are questioning this. It used to be that everybody would finish the same statement the same way, that our system of justice in the United States isn't perfect, but it's the best one we've got. And we were all convinced that this is the best one we've got. Even though none of us have ever seen it operate before, we're basing that opinion off of no information at all. It's based on what we see on Law and Order and other TV shows on, made in Hollywood, and it's not based on what we've actually witnessed from the system itself. And now I think people are coming around to thinking, well, maybe this system isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Maybe it really is something of a swindle. Maybe it is something of an industry to give jobs to lawyers. Maybe there's a reason to be afraid and have some consternation about how this thing operates.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
It deserves our distrust. It's earned our distrust.
Yes, definitely. And I feel like, the reason why I can even attempt, starting this podcast is because there are people who want to hear more about this side of things.
Yeah, and I wish I didn't have a side.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate this. What you're doing is very important. This is very important. And not just because it's about my case. It's about, and it's not just about my case. It's about the larger system and what the larger system accepts and what the larger system is really geared to providing.
And it's really hard to come over to this side. I think people start out on the other side and they're interested in crime or, and forensics and law. And then I think eventually you have to get to a certain point where you want to look at the other side. And I think it's a longer walk to get there. So a lot of people don't want to go. You know what I'm saying?
And it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard to challenge your fundamental core beliefs of something. It is very hard.
Yeah, and there's also an incentive on the police and prosecutor side of things. Because if you believe everything's working just fine, then it doesn't require you to do anything. You can simply tell your government institutions, keep up the good work, send me a memo at the end. But if you have to question that, and if you go down that rabbit hole, and you figure out the whole thing is corrupt and it's a swindle, and it's really a danger to you, and it's a danger to your loved ones, because anybody can kick in your door.
Right.
And you don't know who those people are that are kicking in your door.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know if they're better politically connected than you are. And you better know. You better have a clipboard in your hand and ask the right questions before you kill that person who just kicked in your door. Once you go down that rabbit hole, and you start accepting that maybe the system isn't all that it's cracked up to be, well, now there's an obligation on you. When you ask the questions and you get the answers, well, now you have to take action.
You have 1 minute remaining.
I guess that's good timing. You have to defend yourself. You have to defend yourself from that government. You have to do something, and it requires you to get up and to act. And if you're on the side of the prosecutor and the police, you can just sit in the lazy boy chair and say, okay, the world's fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a whole lot easier to be on the other side of this.
Yeah, it is.
It's a whole lot easier.
That's for sure.
But, I'm about to get cut off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so
Thank you for
much.
having me on.
Thank you for coming. Hopefully we can get together again soon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, anytime.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I think what you're doing is very important.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for letting me do this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I might call you back a little bit later in the day.
Sounds.
See if there's a...
Thank you for using GTL.
So, and there you have it, everyone. We had a nice long conversation with Sean and discussed all kinds of things, politics, about our criminal justice system and how people find themselves in their certain situations. I know Sean was talking about how, someone kicks down your door, and I just want to point out before I sign off that there are people who didn't have a door kicked down. I mean, there are people who are just accused and were at home sleeping that night and actually didn't do anything at all. And those people also are at risk. You don't have to have something happen to you to be at risk. You don't have to be somewhere or be doing something to be at risk of being accused and railroaded by this system completely unfairly. So, thank you all so much for joining us. I love you all. Stay free.